The stranger rode into Knights Ferry, California on a Tuesday morning in March of 1878. His horse limping badly and his own face drawn with exhaustion that spoke of weeks on the trail without proper rest. Yates Quinn had been riding since before dawn, pushing through the foothills of the Sierra Nevada with nothing but determination keeping him upright in the saddle. His brown gelding needed water and feed, and Yates himself could barely remember his last decent meal. The small town appeared through the morning mist like an answered prayer. Its handful of wooden buildings clustered along the Stanislaus River, promising shelter and sustenance. He guided his horse down the main street, noting the worn appearance of most structures, the faded paint and sagging porches that suggested Knights Ferry had seen better days. The gold rush excitement that had once filled these hills had long since faded, leaving behind only those stubborn enough or desperate enough to stay. Yates understood that kind of stubborn desperation. It had been his constant companion for the better part of 3 years. The inn stood at the far end of town, a 2-story building that had once been painted white, but now showed more gray wood than paint. A hand-carved sign hung crooked above the door, reading simply Emerald Inn in letters that had faded to barely legible. Yates dismounted carefully, his legs protesting after so many hours in the saddle, and led his horse to the hitching post. Before he could tie the reins, the front door opened and a woman emerged carrying a bucket of wash water. She wore a simple brown dress covered by a stained apron, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun that had begun to come loose around her face. When she looked up and saw him standing there, Yates felt something shift in his chest, though he could not have said exactly what. "We are open for lodging," she said, her voice carrying a weariness that went bone deep. $2 a night includes breakfast and dinner if I can manage it." She paused, her green eyes taking in his disheveled state and limping horse. "Though I should tell you straight that dinner might be thin. Times have been difficult." "I appreciate the honesty," Yates said, removing his hat. "I will take a room if you have one available, and if you might direct me to a stable for my horse." "There is a livery 2 buildings back the way you came," she said, then hesitated. "Though Sam who runs it might want payment up front. He has had trouble with folks leaving without settling their accounts." Yates nodded and reached for his saddlebag, pulling out a small leather pouch. "I can pay for both the room and the stable in advance, if that makes things easier." Something like relief flickered across the woman's face before she composed herself. "That would be acceptable. I am Clara Everett. I run this establishment with my daughter." "Yates Quinn, madam. Pleased to make your acquaintance." Clara set down her bucket and wiped her hands on her apron. "I will show you to a room once you have settled your horse. The water pump is around back if you need to refresh yourself before dinner." Yates thanked her and led his gelding back toward the livery, noting how empty the streets seemed for mid-morning. A few people moved about their business, but the town felt hollowed out, like a tree still standing but rotted at its core. The livery itself stood half empty, with only 3 other horses in the stalls. Sam Turner, the liveryman, proved to be a grizzled man in his 60s who examined Yates's horse with the practiced eye of someone who had been working with animals his entire life. "This gelding has been ridden hard," he observed, running his hand down the horse's front leg. "Needs rest and proper feeding. I can manage that for 75 cents a day." Yates paid for 3 days up front, figuring that would give both him and his mount time to recover before deciding on his next move. He had been drifting since leaving Texas, taking odd jobs where he could find them, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. The restlessness that had driven him from his family's ranch still gnawed at him. though lately he had begun to wonder if running was solving anything or simply postponing the inevitable reckoning with his own choices. By the time he returned to the Emerald Inn, the sun had climbed higher, and the temperature with it. California in March proved considerably warmer than the mountain passes he had traversed getting here. Clara met him at the door and led him up a narrow staircase to the second floor, where she opened the door to a small room containing a bed, a washstand, and a single chair. The window overlooked the street, its glass slightly warped with age but clean. "Dinner is at 6, Clara said, handing him the key. "There is a dining room downstairs, usually just a few boarders and occasionally some folks from town if they have coin to spare." "Thank you, Mrs. Everett," Yates said. "It is Miss Everett," she corrected, then seemed to catch herself. "My husband passed some years ago. Please make yourself comfortable. If you need anything, I will likely be in the kitchen or tending to repairs. This place always needs repairs." She left before he could respond, her footsteps quick on the stairs. Yates set his saddlebags on the bed and moved to the window, looking out at Knights Ferry with the eye of someone who had seen dozens of such towns. They all told the same story in the end. Boom and bust, hope and disappointment, people clinging to whatever they could salvage from their dreams. He spent the afternoon cleaning his gear and washing up at the pump behind the inn, taking his time and letting the weariness seep out of his muscles. The sun felt good on his face, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to simply stop moving. Not thinking about where he would go next or what job he might find. Just existing in the moment, water on his skin and warmth in the air. At 6 o'clock, he made his way downstairs to find the dining room set with a long table that could seat perhaps a dozen people. Only 3 places had been laid, and Clara emerged from the kitchen carrying a pot of stew that smelled of vegetables and very little meat. Behind her came a young woman of perhaps 19 or 20, carrying a basket of bread that looked fresh-baked. "My daughter, Melody," Clara said by way of introduction. The girl smiled shyly at Yates and set down the bread. She had her mother's green eyes but lighter hair, and she moved with the careful grace of someone accustomed to hard work. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Quinn." "Likewise, miss," Yates replied, taking a seat at the table. "Just us tonight," Clara said, ladling stew into bowls. "We had another boarder until last week, but he moved on. Could not afford to keep paying, and we could not afford to let him stay for free." They ate in relative silence, the stew thin but well seasoned, the bread excellent. Yates complimented Clara on the baking, and she nodded her thanks, though he noticed how little she served herself. Melody ate with the efficient quickness of someone who had learned not to expect seconds. "If I might ask," Yates ventured, "what happened to Knights Ferry? This town seems like it has fallen on hard times." Clara set down her spoon, her expression weary. "The mining played out faster than anyone expected. Most folks moved on to the next strike, the next promise of easy gold. Those of us who stayed thought the town might sustain itself on farming and timber, but the big operations control most of that now. Small holders cannot compete." She paused, seeming to weigh her words. "The inn used to do steady business. Travelers, merchants, families moving west. Now the traffic has dried up, and what little business exists goes to the new hotel that opened last year on the other side of town. Cheaper rates, newer building." "I see," Yates said, understanding the situation immediately. "And I would guess the owner of that hotel might be one of those big operations you mentioned." "Marcus Crane," Melody said, speaking up for the first time. "He owns the lumber mill, the largest farm in the area, and now the hotel. He has been trying to buy this inn from Mother for 2 years." Clara shot her daughter a warning look, but Melody continued. "He wants to tear it down and build a mercantile. says Knights Ferry needs modern businesses, not old establishments clinging to the past. And you have refused to sell, Yates observed. This inn belonged to my husband's family, Clara said quietly. He built most of it with his own hands, expanded it from his father's original structure. When he died, he made me promise to keep it running, to give Melody something stable. I have tried to honor that promise, but I will not lie to you, Mr. Quinn. We are barely holding on. Another few months of empty rooms, and we will have no choice but to accept whatever offer Mr. Crane makes, which I suspect will be considerably less generous than his earlier proposals now that he sees how desperate our situation has become. The bitterness in her voice struck something in Yates, a recognition of the powerlessness that came from fighting a losing battle against forces larger than oneself. He had left Texas partially for that reason, tired of watching small ranchers get squeezed out by bigger outfits backed by Eastern money. It seemed that story played out the same regardless of geography. What would help, he asked. If you could change one thing, what would make the difference? Clara looked at him with surprise, as if no one had bothered to ask that question in quite some time. Honestly, we need repairs we cannot afford to make ourselves. The roof leaks in 3 places. 2 of the upstairs rooms have bad floorboards that could give way. The front porch steps are rotting. The stove in the kitchen needs new parts. Even if guests wanted to stay here, I cannot in good conscience rent rooms that might be dangerous. She stood and began clearing dishes, her movements sharp with frustration. But repairs require money we do not have. We barely earn enough to buy food and pay the property tax. I have sold most everything of value we owned. The only reason we still have the inn at all is because Mr. Crane prefers to wait and buy it for nothing rather than pay what it is actually worth. Yates helped clear the table without being asked, carrying dishes to the kitchen, where he found a surprisingly well-organized space, despite its worn condition. Clara had clearly been making do with aging equipment through sheer determination and skill. He set the dishes by the wash basin and turned to find both women watching him with expressions that mingled curiosity and caution. I am handy with repairs, he said. Grew up on a ranch, learned carpentry from my father. If you would be willing to extend my room and board for a time, I could work on fixing up this place. Get it back to where you can rent all the rooms safely. Clara stared at him, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Melody gasped softly, one hand going to her throat. Finally, Clara found her voice. Mr. Quinn, that is extremely generous, but I could not possibly ask you to work for just room and board. That would hardly be fair compensation for skilled labor. You did not ask, Yates pointed out. I am offering. And I will tell you straight, I have been drifting for 3 years without much purpose. Maybe working with my hands again, building something instead of just passing through would do me good. He met her eyes steadily. I am not asking for charity, Miss Everett. I am proposing an exchange that benefits us both. You get the repairs you need, I get a place to stay while I figure out my next move. Seems fair enough to me. Clara looked at her daughter, some unspoken communication passing between them. Melody nodded slightly, and Clara turned back to Yates. If you truly mean this, then yes. We accept your offer, though I insist on feeding you proper meals, not the thin stew you had tonight. A man doing hard labor needs decent food. That is acceptable, Yates agreed, suppressing a smile at her insistence on maintaining some measure of pride in the arrangement. They shook hands to seal the agreement, and Yates felt the calluses on Clara's palm that spoke of her own hard work. Her grip was firm and steady, and when she met his eyes he saw determination that had been tested but not yet broken. Something in his chest tightened again, that same inexplicable sensation from earlier when he had first seen her. He dismissed it as simple attraction, nothing more complicated than a lonely man responding to a handsome woman. He had no business entertaining romantic notions anyway. His life remained unsettled, his future uncertain. The last thing Clara needed was another complication. That night, Yates lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to the sounds of the old building settling around him. Somewhere down the hall he could hear Clara and Melody talking in low voices, their words indistinct but the cadence speaking of planning and hope. He wondered what he had gotten himself into, making such an open-ended commitment to strangers. 3 years of drifting had made him wary of attachments, yet something about Clara's situation had compelled him to act. Maybe it was simply that he recognized the look in her eyes. He had seen that same expression in his own mirror too many times, the exhaustion of fighting a battle you were slowly losing despite your best efforts. Or maybe he was just tired of running and had finally found something worth stopping for. The next morning Yates woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Scent so enticing he dressed quickly and headed downstairs. He found Clara at the kitchen stove, already fully dressed and working despite the early hour. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the loose strands of hair around her face and turning them golden. "You are up early," she observed, pouring him a cup of coffee without being asked. "I thought drifters preferred to sleep late." "Old habits," Yates said, accepting the cup gratefully. "Ranch life starts before dawn. Never could shake the pattern even after I left." "Why did you leave?" Clara asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "Forgive me, that is presumptuous. Your past is your own business." "It is a fair question given the circumstances," Yates said, leaning against the counter. "Simple answer is I got tired of fighting a losing battle. My father's ranch was getting squeezed by larger outfits, and I could see how it would end. Figured I could leave on my own terms or stay and watch everything we built crumble. Chose to leave." Clara flipped the bacon with practiced efficiency. "Do you regret it?" Yates considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. I wonder if I gave up too easy, if I should have stayed and fought harder. But mostly I think I just did not know what I was fighting for anymore. The ranch was my father's dream, not necessarily mine." He sipped his coffee, surprised by his own honesty. "What about you? Do you ever regret staying?" "Every single day," Clara admitted quietly. "But what choice do I have? This inn is all Melody and I possess in the world. If we lose it, we have nothing. No family to take us in, no husband to provide for us, no skills that would earn us decent employment elsewhere. So I stay and I fight because the alternative is unthinkable." She served breakfast with quick movements, calling for Melody, who appeared looking slightly more awake than the previous evening. They ate together at the kitchen table rather than the formal dining room, a choice that felt more intimate and somehow appropriate. Yates learned that Melody helped her mother run the inn but harbored dreams of becoming a teacher someday. Clara listened to her daughter talk about the school in Sacramento where she hoped to train, and Yates saw both pride and sadness in her expression. "She should have the chance to pursue her own dreams," Clara said, after Melody left to make up the spare rooms out of habit. "Not be trapped here struggling alongside me. But teacher training requires money we do not have, and I cannot spare her help long enough for her to take a position elsewhere to save up." "Sounds like more reason to get this place profitable again," Yates observed. Clara smiled, and it transformed her face entirely. The weariness lifted for a moment, replaced by something younger and more vital. "You are an optimist, Mr. Quinn. I had forgotten what that looked like. Call me Yates," he said, "and I prefer to think of it as practical. We have work to do, and sitting around being pessimistic will not accomplish it. So let us start with the roof. Those leaks need addressing before the spring rains come." They spent the morning assessing the damage, Yates climbing up to examine the roof while Clara pointed out the problem areas from inside. He found exactly what he expected, several sections where the shingles had deteriorated or blown away entirely, leaving the underlayment exposed to weather. Fixable, but it would require materials and several days of work. "I can get what we need on credit," Clara said when he explained the situation. "The lumber yard owner is one of the few people in town who has not yet given up on us, though I hate adding to our debt." "Sometimes you have to spend money to make money," Yates said. "Get the materials ordered and I will start working. Once we get the roof solid and the rooms safely rentable, we can think about how to attract guests." Over the following days, Yates fell into a routine that felt surprisingly comfortable. He woke early, ate breakfast with Clara and Melody, then spent his days working on repairs. The roof came first, sweating under the California sun as he replaced shingles and sealed leaks. Clara brought him water throughout the day, sometimes staying to watch him work or hand him tools. They talked while he worked, sharing stories that gradually revealed more about each other. Clara told him about her husband Thomas, who had died in a logging accident 5 years earlier, leaving her alone with a teenage daughter and an inn that was already beginning to struggle. She spoke of him with fondness but not overwhelming grief, and Yates understood that she had done her mourning and made peace with moving forward. For his part, Yates shared more about his family's ranch in Texas, his 2 brothers who had stayed to fight the losing battle while he left, and the guilt that sometimes gnawed at him in quiet moments. Clara listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that showed she understood more about complicated family dynamics than she let on initially. "You should write to them," she said one afternoon, handing him a dipper of water. "Your brothers. Even if you cannot go back, they deserve to know you are thinking about them." "Maybe," Yates allowed, though the thought of confronting that particular piece of his past still felt too raw. He changed the subject, asking about Knights Ferry's history, and Clara entertained him with stories about the town's wilder days during the gold rush. As the roof repairs progressed, Yates moved on to fixing the dangerous floorboards in the upstairs rooms. This work required more precision, measuring and cutting replacement boards to fit exactly right. Melody sometimes assisted him, holding boards steady while he nailed them in place, and he found himself growing fond of the girl's quiet determination. She reminded him of his youngest brother, always watching and learning, absorbing skills that might prove useful someday. "Mother seems happier," Melody observed one afternoon when they were working on the second damaged room. "She has been smiling more this past week than in the previous year combined." Yates drove a nail home carefully before responding. "She has been carrying a heavy burden. Maybe having some help has lightened it a bit." "It is more than that," Melody said, her green eyes studying him with an intelligence that belied her years. "She likes you, and I think you like her too." Yates felt his ears grow warm. "Your mother is an admirable woman. Anyone would respect her strength and determination." Melody laughed softly. "I said she likes you, not respects you, though I suppose she does that too." She grew more serious. "I worry about her, Mr. Quinn. She has sacrificed so much trying to keep this inn running, trying to provide for me. She deserves some happiness of her own." "She deserves a lot more than a drifter with no prospects," Yates said quietly. "Maybe you are not giving yourself enough credit," Melody replied. "A drifter would not stop to help strangers fix their broken building. A drifter would not work from dawn to dusk for nothing but room and board. You stopped drifting the moment you decided to stay and help. Maybe you just have not realized it yet." Her words stayed with Yates long after she went back downstairs to help her mother with dinner. He found himself thinking about them as he finished the floorboards, as he washed up at the pump, as he sat at the dinner table watching Clara move around the kitchen with practiced grace. When had he stopped thinking of his time here as temporary? When had he started caring about whether the inn succeeded not just as a project, but because he wanted Clara to have the victory she deserved? 2 weeks into his stay, the roof repairs completed and the floors safely restored, Yates tackled the rotting front porch. This required demolition first, tearing out the damaged wood and exposing the underlying structure. He worked shirtless in the warm afternoon sun, muscles straining as he pried up old boards and tossed them aside. Clara came out with water and stopped short, her eyes widening slightly before she composed herself. Yates had not considered how he might look, sweat gleaming on skin tanned from years of outdoor work, but the expression on her face made him suddenly very aware of himself. He took the water with a quiet thanks, watching her watch him over the rim of the dipper. "You have done good work," Clara said, her voice slightly unsteady. "The inn looks better than it has in years." "Still more to do," Yates replied. "Porch, kitchen stove, some exterior painting. But we are making progress." "Yes," Clara agreed, but she was not looking at the repairs. She was looking at him, her green eyes holding something that made his heart beat faster. For a long moment they simply stood there, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Melody called from inside, and the moment broke. Clara turned away quickly, her cheeks flushed, and retreated into the inn. Yates returned to work with renewed vigor, trying to ignore the way his hands shook slightly as he gripped the crowbar. That evening at dinner, the tension between them had shifted into something new and undeniable. They were careful not to let their hands touch when passing dishes, hyper-aware of each other in a way that had not existed before. Melody watched them with barely concealed amusement, and Yates suspected she saw far more than either adult wanted to admit. After dinner, Yates volunteered to help with dishes despite Clara's protests. They worked side by side at the wash basin, falling into an easy rhythm of washing and drying. The kitchen window stood open to catch the evening breeze, and somewhere outside a bird sang its twilight song. "I have been thinking," Clara said softly, her hands stilling in the wash water, "about what comes next, once the repairs are finished." Yates set down the plate he had been drying, his stomach tightening. "What about it? I am wondering if you have given any thought to staying longer, not just until the repairs are done, but perhaps more permanently." She turned to face him, water dripping from her hands. "I know you said you were drifting, trying to figure out your next move, but you have been good for this place, Yates. Good for Melody. Good for me." "Clara," he started, then stopped, unsure what to say. His heart wanted to agree immediately, but his head cautioned restraint. "I would like that. More than you might realize. But I need to be honest with you about what I am offering. I am not a wealthy man. I have some savings, but nothing substantial. No property, no established business. If I stay, I am bringing myself and my labor, nothing more." "That is more than enough," Clara said firmly. "I am not looking for someone to rescue me, Yates. I am looking for a partner, someone who will work beside me to build something lasting, someone who sees potential where others see only problems." She stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. "I think you might be that person if you are willing." Yates reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently in his calloused hands. "I am willing," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have been running for 3 years, and I think I finally understand what I was running toward instead of away from." He kissed her then, soft and careful, tasting the salt of dishwater on her lips. Clara made a small sound and leaned into him, her wet hands coming up to grip his shirt. The kiss deepened, 3 years of loneliness and 2 weeks of building tension finally finding release, When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara laughed shakily. "Well, that certainly changes things. In a good way, I hope," Yates said, reluctant to release her. "In a very good way," Clara confirmed. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "But we should be practical about this. We barely know each other, really. Perhaps we should take time to court properly before making any serious commitments." "Agreed," Yates said, though everything in him wanted to argue for faster progress. "We will do this right." They returned to washing dishes with silly grins on both their faces, bumping shoulders and stealing glances like young lovers instead of two people in their 30s who should know better. When Melody returned to the kitchen and saw them, she smiled so widely it looked like her face might split. "Finally," she said. "I was beginning to think I would have to lock you two in a room together." "Melody!" Clara exclaimed, mortified, but her daughter just laughed and began putting away the dried dishes. The next few weeks passed in a haze of work and growing affection. Yates finished the porch repairs and started on painting the exterior, giving the emerald in a fresh coat of white paint that made it gleam in the California sunshine. Clara worked beside him when she could, and they talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's rhythms and preferences. In the evenings, after dinner was cleared and Melody had retired to her room, Yates and Clara would sit on the newly repaired porch and watch the town settle into darkness. Sometimes they held hands, sometimes they kissed, but mostly they just talked, building the foundation of understanding that relationships required to last. Clara told him about the early days of her marriage, the hope she and Thomas had shared for building something meaningful in Knights Ferry. She spoke of losing him, the terrible shock and grief, and the determination to honor his memory by keeping the inn running. Yates listened and understood that he was not competing with a ghost, but rather being invited to help carry forward something important. For his part, Yates opened up about his family in ways he had not managed in 3 years of drifting. He confessed his fears that he had been running from responsibility rather than toward freedom, his guilt over leaving his brothers to face challenges alone, and his slowly growing realization that maybe he had needed to leave in order to become the man he was meant to be, rather than the one his father had expected. "You should write to them," Clara said again one evening, more firmly this time. "Tell them what you have told me. They are your family, Yates. That matters." So he did, sitting at the small desk in his room and composing a letter that took 3 drafts before he felt it said what needed saying. He told his brothers about Knights Ferry, about the inn and Clara, and finding purpose in helping rebuild something worthwhile. He apologized for leaving so abruptly, explained as best he could why he had needed to go, and cautiously expressed hope that they might write back. Posting the letter felt like releasing a weight he had carried for too long. Clara squeezed his hand when he told her it was done, understanding without needing to ask what the gesture had cost him. As the inn's appearance improved, something unexpected happened. People began to stop and inquire about rooms. First a traveling salesman who needed a place for the night, then a family moving west who stayed 3 days. Word began to spread that the Emerald Inn was back in business, and while the traffic remained light, it represented the first positive momentum Clara had experienced in over a year. She and Yates celebrated by splurging on a slightly better cut of meat for dinner, and the 3 of them ate with an optimism that had been absent before. Melody talked excitedly about maybe being able to afford teacher training within another year or 2 if business continued improving. Clara glowed with pride and relief, and Yates felt something settle deep in his chest, a sense of rightness he had not experienced in far too long. But their growing success did not go unnoticed. Marcus Crane, the businessman who owned most of Knights Ferry's profitable enterprises, began to take an interest in the revitalized inn. He appeared one afternoon in late April, driving up in a fine carriage that seemed ostentatious for such a small town. Yates was painting the trim around the front windows when Crane dismounted, his expensive suit and polished boots marking him as someone with money and influence. He was perhaps 50 years old, clean-shaven, and carrying himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. "You must be the drifter I have heard about," Crane said without preamble. "The one doing all this work for Clara Everett." "Yates Quinn," Yates replied evenly, not bothering to climb down from his ladder. "And you would be Marcus Crane." "Indeed." I wanted to see for myself what all the fuss was about. Crane surveyed the fresh paint and repaired porch with an expression that mixed surprise and displeasure. "I must admit, you have done impressive work. The inn looks better than it has in years." "That was the idea," Yates said, returning to his painting. Crane watched him for a moment, then said, "I wonder if you understand what you have gotten yourself into, Mr. Quinn. This town is dying. A fresh coat of paint will not change that reality. Clara Everett is fighting a losing battle, and you are simply postponing the inevitable." "Maybe," Yates allowed. "Or maybe the town just needed someone to believe in it again." "Belief does not pay bills," Crane countered. "I have made Clara several fair offers for this property. She would be wise to accept before circumstances force her to sell for even less." Yates set down his brush and climbed down the ladder, facing Crane directly. "Seems to me that if you were making actually fair offers, circumstances would not need to force anything. A fair offer gets accepted." Crane's expression hardened. "I do not appreciate your tone, Mr. Quinn. I am a businessman trying to help modernize this town. That inn is old and inefficient. The land would be better used for a modern mercantile." "The inn is none of your business," Clara's voice cut in sharply. She emerged from the front door, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes flashing with anger. "And Mr. Quinn's tone is perfectly appropriate given that you have come to my property to insult my business." "Clara, I am trying to help you," Crane said, his voice smoothing into something meant to be placating. "You cannot possibly make this inn profitable long term. Accept my offer now while it still has some value." "Your offer is half what this property is worth, and you know it," Clara shot back. "You want to wait until I am desperate enough to accept anything, then tear down what my husband built and replace it with something that benefits only you. Well, I am not desperate anymore, Mr. Crane, so you can take your insulting offers and leave." Crane's jaw tightened. "You are making a mistake, both of you. This town belongs to people willing to invest in its future, not cling to its past." "Then I suppose it is fortunate that we are doing both," Yates said quietly, "honoring the past while building a sustainable future." "Now I believe Miss Everett asked you to leave." For a moment tension crackled in the air, Crane's eyes moving between Clara and Yates with calculation. Then he nodded curtly, climbed back into his carriage, and drove away without another word. Clara let out a shaky breath once he was gone. "That was probably foolish. He could make things difficult for us if he chose." "Maybe," Yates said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "But standing up to bullies is rarely foolish, even when it is risky, and you are not facing him alone anymore." Clara leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "No, I suppose I am not. That is taking some getting used to, having someone stand with me instead of just watching me struggle." "Better get used to it," Yates said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Because I am not going anywhere." True to Crane's implied threat, the following weeks brought complications. The lumber yard suddenly demanded immediate payment for the materials Clara had bought on credit. The property tax assessment came back notably higher than previous years. and the town council announced new business licensing fees that seemed designed to burden small establishments while exempting Crane's larger operations. Clara and Yates sat up late one night going over the accounts, trying to figure out how to manage the new financial pressures. The inn was bringing in more money than before, but not yet enough to cover both regular expenses and the sudden additional costs. "He is trying to squeeze us out without having to make a buyout offer," Clara said wearily. "Force us into debt we cannot repay, then buy the inn for nothing when the bank forecloses. Then we need to generate more income faster," Yates said, studying the numbers. "What if we offered services beyond just rooms? Meals for townspeople, not just boarders, laundry services, maybe rent out the dining room for events?" Clara considered this, her business mind engaging with the possibilities. "The kitchen could handle additional meal preparation if we bought more supplies. Laundry would require equipment we cannot afford. But the dining room idea has merit. There is nowhere in Knights Ferry suitable for private parties or meetings, if we could offer that space." They worked through the night developing a plan, Clara's knowledge of the business combining with Yates's practical problem-solving. By dawn, they had outlined a strategy that might work if they could attract enough customers quickly enough. The next day, Clara visited every business and home in Knights Ferry, politely but persistently promoting the Emerald Inn's new services. She offered competitive rates on meals, emphasized the newly renovated facilities, and suggested that local organizations might find the dining room perfect for their meetings. Yates, meanwhile, finished the exterior painting and started on interior improvements, making the public spaces as welcoming as possible. Their efforts began to show results within a week. The Ladies' Church Society booked the dining room for their monthly meeting. Several families started coming for Sunday dinner, appreciating Clara's excellent cooking and reasonable prices. A traveling merchant chose the Emerald Inn over Crane's Hotel after seeing the fresh paint and hearing about the quality of service. With increased business came increased work, and Yates found himself taking on more responsibilities beyond repairs. He helped Clara in the kitchen, served meals, managed the front desk when she was busy cooking, and generally made himself useful in whatever way needed. They worked together with an easy coordination that felt natural, anticipating each other's needs and supporting each other through long days. Melody watched their partnership with obvious satisfaction, often making comments about how well they complemented each other. "You move around each other like you have been doing this for years instead of weeks," she observed one busy dinner service. "It is nice to see Mother so happy." Yates was happy too, he realized with some surprise, happier than he had been in years, maybe ever. The work was hard and the challenges real, but he woke each morning with purpose and ended each day with satisfaction. Having Clara beside him, building something together, filled spaces inside him he had not quite known were empty. In early May, a letter arrived from Texas. Yates recognized his brother's handwriting on the envelope and felt his stomach clench with anxiety as he opened it. Clara gave him privacy to read, though she stayed close enough that he could feel her supportive presence. The letter was longer than expected, his brother Aaron writing with the careful penmanship of someone unused to correspondence. He expressed surprise at hearing from Yates, admitted that he and their other brother Samuel had been worried about his silence, and shared news from home. The ranch was still struggling but holding on, bought some time by selling off part of the land to a neighbor. Aaron wrote that he understood why Yates had left, that he bore no resentment, and that he hoped Yates had found whatever he was looking for in California. The last paragraph made Yates's throat tighten with emotion. Aaron wrote that their father had been asking about him, that the old man had mellowed somewhat in the intervening years and might be open to reconciliation if Yates ever wanted to come home. But more importantly, Aaron wanted Yates to know that he was proud of his younger brother for having the courage to forge his own path rather than simply accepting what others expected of him. "Good news?" Clara asked softly when Yates finally looked up from the letter. "Better than I expected," Yates managed, his voice rough. "My brother says they are doing all right, says he understands why I left." Clara moved closer and wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his shoulder. "That must be a relief." "It is," Yates agreed, covering her hands with his own. "Makes me realize I was carrying more guilt than necessary. They are managing without me, which I suppose I needed to hear." "Does any part of you want to go back?" Clara asked carefully, though he could hear the fear beneath her neutral tone. Yates turned in her arms so he could look at her directly. "No. Whatever I was looking for when I left Texas, I found it here. Found you, found purpose, found a place I could see building a real life. I am not going anywhere, Clara. You are stuck with me." She smiled with obvious relief and kissed him, soft and sweet. "I can live with that." Their relationship deepened through May and into June as the inn continued to grow its business. They stole moments together whenever they could. Kisses in the kitchen between meal preparations, holding hands while reviewing accounts, sitting close on the porch after Melody went to bed. The attraction between them had ripened into something deeper and more substantial, rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose as much as physical desire. One evening in late June, after a particularly successful dinner service that filled every table in the dining room, Clara and Yates walked down to the river to watch the sunset. The Stanislaus moved swift and clear, reflecting gold and orange light as the sun dropped behind the western hills. "I have been thinking about the future," Clara said, her hand warm in Yates's, "about what success might look like if we can keep this momentum going." "What does it look like?" Yates asked. "Melody going to teacher training like she dreams about, the inn fully booked most nights. Maybe hiring help so we are not working quite so constantly." She paused, then continued more quietly. "You and I married, if that is something you want too." Yates felt his heart kick hard against his ribs. "You are proposing to me, Clara Everett." "I suppose I am," Clara said, turning to face him with a slight flush on her cheeks. "Unless you would prefer to be the one doing the proposing." "I would prefer," Yates said, pulling her close, "to tell you that I have been wanting to ask but worried it was too soon. I love you, Clara. I think I started falling for you the day I rode into town and you were honest about how difficult things were. You are strong and smart and capable, and building a life with you is everything I did not know I wanted." "Is that a yes?" Clara asked, her eyes shining. "That is absolutely a yes," Yates confirmed, and kissed her thoroughly to emphasize the point. They married in August of 1878 in a simple ceremony at Knights Ferry's small church. Most of the town attended, surprised by how quickly the situation had developed, but generally supportive given how much the couple had done to improve the inn. Melody served as maid of honor, crying happy tears throughout the ceremony. Even Clara's few remaining friends from before her husband's death came out to celebrate, pleased to see her finding happiness again. Marcus Crane did not attend, though he sent a wedding gift with a card that wished them luck in their struggling business. Clara threw the card away but kept the gift, a set of fine china that she declared too nice for Crane to deserve but too useful to reject. The wedding night proved slightly awkward given that Melody was sleeping just down the hall, but they managed to consummate their marriage with enthusiasm if not privacy. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Clara whispered against Yates's chest, "You are the partner I always needed." I did not think I would ever find this again." Yates tightened his arms around her, feeling the truth of her words resonate through him. He had spent 3 years wandering, looking for something he could not name, and found it in this woman who had been fighting her own lonely battle. Together they were stronger than either could be alone, and that felt like the most profound discovery of his life. "I was lost until I found you," he murmured back. "Did not even realize how lost until I stopped running long enough to see what was right in front of me." They talked late into the night, making plans for the future now that they were officially partners in both business and life. Clara wanted to expand the menu options, perhaps develop some signature dishes that would draw people from surrounding towns. Yates suggested building a proper stable adjacent to the inn, so they could offer horse boarding as an additional service. Both agreed that hiring help would be essential once they could afford it, allowing them more time to manage rather than simply work constantly. The months following their wedding proved challenging but rewarding. The inn continued to build its reputation for quality and service, gradually winning customers away from Crane's newer hotel. Clara's cooking became locally famous, with people traveling from nearby towns specifically to eat at the Emerald Inn. Yates built a 6-stall stable behind the property, offering boarding rates that attracted traveling merchants who appreciated having their animals cared for properly. By November, they were profitable enough to hire their first employee, a young man named Peter who handled stable duties and basic maintenance, freeing Yates to focus on larger projects. In December, they hired a woman named Sarah to help Clara with cooking and cleaning during their increasingly busy periods. The additional help transformed their daily lives, reducing the constant exhaustion that had marked their first months of marriage. Marcus Crane made one more attempt to acquire the property in early 1879, appearing at the inn with a revised offer that was marginally better than his previous proposals. Clara and Yates listened politely, then declined together, pointing out that the inn was now worth considerably more than Crane was offering, and they had no interest in selling at any price. "You are making a mistake," Crane said, though his words lacked conviction. "Success is never guaranteed. One bad season could ruin you." "Maybe," Clara agreed calmly, "but we will face whatever comes together, and that makes all the difference." After Crane left, Yates pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her soundly. "I am proud of you, of us. We have built something real here." "We have," Clara agreed, smiling up at him. "Though I think we are just getting started." She was proved right over the following year. The Emerald Inn became the preferred lodging in Knights Ferry, known throughout the region for comfort, quality food, and reasonable prices. They expanded their services further, Clara offering cooking classes to local women and Yates running a small carpentry business on the side that brought in additional income while allowing him to exercise skills he enjoyed. Melody enrolled in teacher training in Sacramento in the fall of 1879, funded by her mother and stepfather, who insisted that pursuing her dreams was more important than staying to help run the inn. She came home for holidays glowing with excitement about her studies, and Yates took pride in having helped make her opportunities possible. In early 1880, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both of them with joy mixed with trepidation, given that Clara was 35 and had not carried a child in 20 years. But the pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in September of 1880 she delivered a healthy baby boy they named Thomas Yates Quinn, honoring both Clara's first husband and their own joined family. Holding his son for the first time, Yates felt something shift permanently inside him. This tiny person represented everything he had built with Clara, everything they had fought for and achieved together. He thought about the man he had been riding into Knights Ferry 2 years earlier, lost and purposeless, and marveled at how completely his life had transformed. "He is perfect," Clara murmured, watching Yates cradle their son with surprising gentleness for such large hands. "We made something beautiful." "We did," Yates agreed, unable to look away from Thomas's small face. "Thank you for giving me this. A family, a purpose, a home. Everything I did not know I needed." Over the next few years, their family and business continued to flourish. Melody graduated from teacher training and secured a position at Knights Ferry School, allowing her to live at home while pursuing her career. She proved to be an excellent teacher, beloved by her students and respected by parents. She met and married a decent man named Robert in 1882, a schoolteacher from a neighboring town who relocated to Knights Ferry to be with her. Thomas grew from infant to energetic toddler to curious young boy, bringing chaos and joy in equal measure to the inn. Guests delighted in the child who wandered through the dining room greeting everyone, and Thomas learned to charm extra treats from visitors with his father's easy smile and his mother's green eyes. In 1883, Clara became pregnant again, delivering twin daughters in early 1884 that they named Sarah and Grace. The girls kept everyone busy, and Yates found himself grateful for the employees they had hired and the systems they had developed that allowed the inn to function even when the family was focused on the babies. Marcus Crane's business interests slowly declined during these years, as the Emerald Inn's success drew customers and energy back to Knights Ferry's older section. Crane eventually sold most of his holdings and moved to Sacramento, seeking opportunities in a larger city where his aggressive business tactics might be more appreciated. His hotel struggled under new ownership and eventually closed, unable to compete with the Emerald Inn's established reputation. By 1885, Knights Ferry had stabilized into a small but viable community, supported by agriculture and timber but no longer dependent on boom or bust cycles. The town's revival traced directly back to the Emerald Inn's success, which had demonstrated that quality and determination could overcome difficult circumstances. Clara and Yates found themselves respected leaders in the community, sought out for advice by other business owners and serving on various town committees. Yates maintained regular correspondence with his brothers in Texas, and in the summer of 1885, Aaron came to visit with his own family. Meeting his brother again after 7 years proved emotional for both men, but their relationship proved stronger for the honesty of their letters. Aaron spent 2 weeks at the inn, marveling at what Yates had built and admitting that leaving had clearly been the right choice for his younger brother. "You found what you needed," Aaron said on the last night of his visit, sitting on the porch that Yates had rebuilt years earlier. "I can see it in how you are with Clara, with your children. You are happy in a way you never were in Texas." "I am," Yates agreed. "Though I regret the years we lost contact. I should have written sooner." "We both could have tried harder," Aaron allowed, "but what matters is we are here now, and I am proud of you, brother, truly." After Aaron's family returned to Texas, Yates felt a sense of closure he had not realized he needed. He had made peace with his past, built a solid future, and surrounded himself with people he loved who loved him in return. The restlessness that had driven him from Texas had been replaced by contentment rooted in purpose and partnership. On an evening in October 1885, after putting the children to bed and ensuring the inn was settled for the night, Clara and Yates sat together on their porch as they had done countless times over the 7 years since they met. The air carried autumn's crispness, promising rain before morning. Yates held Clara's hand, marveling as he often did at how completely this woman had changed his life. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked suddenly. "Stopping here instead of continuing to drift, tying yourself down to an inn and a family when you could have kept your freedom?" Yates turned to look at her, seeing the slight vulnerability in her expression despite years of marriage. "Not for a single moment. You gave me something I did not even know I was looking for. A place to belong, a reason to stay, someone to build a life with rather than just pass through." He paused, then continued more softly. "That first day when you were honest about the inn struggling, when you did not pretend everything was fine, something in me responded. I was tired of running, tired of fighting battles alone. You offered me the chance to fight alongside someone instead, and that made all the difference." Clara leaned against his shoulder, fitting perfectly into the space beside him as she always had. "You saved this inn, saved me and Melody. I do not think we would have survived without you." "We saved each other," Yates corrected gently. "I was just as lost as you were struggling. We found each other at exactly the right moment and built something neither of us could have managed alone." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Inside the inn, their children slept safely. Around them, the town they had helped revive settled into evening quiet. Tomorrow would bring work and challenges as every day did, but they would face it together. Yates thought about that exhausted man who had ridden into Knights Ferry 7 years earlier, his horse limping and his future uncertain. He could not have imagined then what waited for him in this small California town. Could not have predicted that helping a struggling innkeeper would lead to love, family, and the sense of home that had eluded him his entire life. "Thank you," he said quietly, squeezing Clara's hand, "for seeing something in me worth keeping when I was just a drifter passing through." Clara turned her head to kiss his jaw softly. "Thank you for stopping long enough to see what we could build together." The years continued to unfold with their mixture of challenges and rewards. Thomas started school with his Aunt Melody as one of his teachers, proving to be a bright student with his father's practical skills and his mother's head for business. The twins grew into lively little girls who delighted in helping their mother in the kitchen, standing on stools to stir pots and knead bread dough under Clara's patient guidance. The Emerald Inn's reputation continued to spread, becoming known as one of the finest establishments between Sacramento and the mountain towns. Travel writers mentioned it in their guides, merchants recommended it to colleagues, and families planned visits around the opportunity to stay there. Clara and Yates expanded twice more, adding additional rooms and eventually a separate dining building to accommodate the growing demand for their excellent meals. They hired more staff as needed, becoming the largest employer in Knights Ferry, and providing steady work for people who might otherwise have needed to leave town for opportunities. Peter, their first employee, eventually became the stable manager and married Sarah, who had started as Clara's kitchen help. The couple lived in a small house on the inn's property and had children who grew up playing with Thomas and the twins. Melody and Robert had 3 children of their own, bringing the extended family together for regular Sunday dinners that filled the dining room with noise and laughter. Yates watched his children play with their cousins and felt profound gratitude for the life he had stumbled into. Everything he valued most had stemmed from the decision to help a struggling innkeeper during hard times. In the summer of 1890, a journalist from San Francisco came to write a story about successful small-town businesses. She spent 3 days at the Emerald Inn, interviewing Clara and Yates about how they had built such a thriving enterprise in a town that had been dying when they started. "What is your secret?" the journalist asked as they sat in the now always busy dining room. How did you take an inn that was on the verge of closure and turn it into one of the most successful establishments in the region? Clara and Yates looked at each other. 12 years of partnership allowing them to communicate without words. Then Clara smiled and said simply, "We worked together. Every decision, every challenge, every triumph has been shared equally. Neither of us could have achieved this alone, but together we made it possible." Partnership, the journalist said, writing quickly, both in business and in marriage. They are not separate things, Yates added. Our marriage and our business success are completely intertwined. We built both on the same foundation of mutual respect, honest communication, and shared purpose. The inn succeeds because we are good partners. We are good partners because we put the work into our marriage. The article ran in September and brought even more visitors to Knights Ferry, people curious to see the inn that had been featured in a major newspaper. The town benefited from the increased traffic, with other businesses seeing improved trade. The mayor presented Clara and Yates with a commendation for their contributions to Knights Ferry's revival, a gesture that embarrassed them both but also felt validating. By 1893, 15 years after Yates first rode into town, the Emerald Inn employed 20 people and served hundreds of guests annually. Thomas, now 13, had started learning the business in earnest, working alongside his father on building projects and helping his mother with accounts. The twins, 9 years old, already showed the hospitality instincts that made the inn successful, greeting guests warmly and making everyone feel welcome. Melody had become the school's head teacher, respected throughout the county for her innovative teaching methods. Her eldest son had just started at university in San Francisco, planning to study law and make his own mark on the world. The family success spread across generations, each person building on the foundation that Clara and Yates had established through determination and partnership. On a warm evening in September 1893, Clara and Yates celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary with a dinner that included just their immediate family. The children had organized everything as a surprise, decorating the private family dining room and preparing an elaborate meal under Peter's wife Sarah's supervision. Toasts were made, stories shared, laughter filling the space. Yates looked around the table at his family, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. Thomas sat tall and proud, already showing signs of the man he would become. The twins chattered excitedly about a school project, finishing each other's sentences as they always did. Melody and Robert held hands beneath the table, still obviously in love after 11 years of marriage. And beside him, Clara radiated the contentment of a woman who had fought for everything she valued and won. Her hand rested on his thigh beneath the table, warm and familiar, a constant reminder of how completely their lives had intertwined. After dinner, after the children had been sent to bed and Melody and Robert had returned to their own home, Clara and Yates walked out to their porch one more time. It had become their ritual over 15 years, this quiet moment of connection at the end of each day. The porch had been replaced once more since Yates first repaired it, built stronger and larger to accommodate the rocking chairs where they now sat. 15 years, Clara said softly, taking his hand. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like we just met yesterday. I know what you mean, Yates agreed. I can barely remember what my life was like before you. It all feels like it happened to a different person. In many ways it did, Clara observed. We have both changed so much, grown so much. Yates thought about the restless, searching man he had been at 30, running from a future he did not want towards something he could not name. And about Clara at 33, fighting a losing battle alone, carrying burdens that should have been shared. They had found each other at exactly the right moment, when both were ready to stop struggling alone and start building together. "I love you," he said, simple words that carried 15 years of meaning. "You gave me a life I did not know was possible." "We gave each other that," Clara corrected, as she always did when he tried to give her too much credit. "You rode into town and offered help when I needed it most. But I chose to accept that help, chose to trust you, chose to build something with you rather than continuing to struggle alone. We both made the decision to create this life together." She turned in her chair to face him more fully, her expression serious. "You were the partner I always needed, Yates. Not because you rescued me, but because you stood beside me. You never tried to take over or diminish what I had built. You just added your strength to mine and let us both become more than we could have been alone." Yates leaned forward and kissed her, soft and lingering, pouring into that kiss everything he felt but could never quite articulate. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, breathing in the familiar scent of her. "Thank you," he whispered, "for seeing me, for keeping me, for building this life with me." "Always," Clara promised, and sealed it with another kiss. They sat together as the stars emerged, comfortable in the silence that came from truly knowing another person. Tomorrow would bring work and responsibility, challenges and opportunities, the normal flow of life they had built together. But tonight was simply theirs, this moment of peace and connection that made everything else worthwhile. Inside the inn, their legacy was sleeping. Children who would carry forward what they had built, who would remember their parents' partnership as the model for their own relationships. The business would continue, probably for generations, a testament to what two people could achieve when they combined their strengths and faced life as true partners. But more than the material success, more than the thriving business or the comfortable life, what mattered most was the love they had found in each other. That first day when Yates offered help and Clara accepted had been the beginning of something neither could have predicted. A partnership that became friendship, that became love, that became family. Everything good in both their lives had flowed from that initial decision to face challenges together rather than alone. Yates looked at his wife of 15 years, seeing both the woman she had been when they met and all the ways they had grown together since. The silver threading through her hair, the laugh lines around her eyes, the confident set of her shoulders that came from years of success after so much struggle. She was beautiful and strong and his, and he was hers, bound together by choice and commitment and love that had only deepened with time. "What are you thinking?" Clara asked, noticing his intense gaze. "That I am the luckiest man in California," Yates said honestly. "Maybe the luckiest man anywhere," Clara laughed, the sound carrying pure joy. "Then I suppose that makes me the luckiest woman. What a pair we make." "The best pair," Yates agreed, pulling her closer despite the awkwardness of their separate chairs. "Partners in everything." "Partners in everything," Clara echoed, settling against his chest with the ease of long practice. They stayed there until the night grew cold and the inn settled into deep silence, neither wanting to break the spell of the moment. Eventually, practical considerations drove them inside, but they went hand in hand, still together, as they had been through everything since that first day in March of 1878. As they climbed the stairs to their bedroom, passing the rooms where their children slept safely, Yates felt grateful beyond words for the decision that had changed his life. To stop running, to offer help, to stay when every instinct had said to keep moving. Clara had been the destination he had been searching for without knowing it, and together they had built something that would outlast them both. In bed that night, Clara curled against him as she always did, her breath evening out quickly into sleep. Yates stayed awake a bit longer, listening to her breathe and feeling the solid warmth of her beside him. 15 years, and he still marveled at having this, having her, having the life they had created together. He thought about that exhausted cowboy riding into Knights Ferry with no plan beyond finding a place to rest for a few days. How close he had come to simply passing through, resting briefly, and then moving on as he had done in so many other towns. What if he had not offered to help with repairs? What if Clara had refused his offer? What if 1,000 small decisions had gone differently, but they had not? He had stopped, had offered, had stayed. Clara had accepted, had trusted, had opened her heart to the possibility of partnership again. And from those choices had grown everything that mattered. Yates pressed a soft kiss to Clara's sleeping forehead and let himself drift toward sleep, content in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring more of the life they had built together. More work, more challenges, more small moments of connection and joy. More years of partnership with the woman who had become his everything. The Emerald Inn stood strong and prosperous, a symbol of what determination and partnership could achieve. Knights Ferry thrived around it, a community that had survived its hard times and emerged stronger. And at the center of it all, Clara and Yates Quinn continued building their life together, day by day, moment by moment, choice by choice. It was everything neither had dared hope for when they were struggling alone. And it was only possible because they had found each other, had chosen each other, and had committed to facing everything as true partners. That was the real secret to their success, the foundation on which everything else had been built. Not individual strength but combined effort, not competition but cooperation, not alone but together, always together. The story of how a drifting cowboy helped a struggling innkeeper during her hardest times, and how she recognized him as the partner she had always needed, became part of Knights Ferry's history. People told it to their children, who told it to their children. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life came from being willing to stop running long enough to see what waited right in front of you. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, what waited was everything you never knew you needed.